Monday. John Lorden here with another episode of Brain Scratch Case Cracked. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We've got another case we're going to dive into and find that critical piece that helped solve it. This is one that we like to call SkyDIEving. Many different types of weapons and devices have been used to try to commit the perfect murder. But what about an item made for protecting a person's life, like a parachute? Buckle up. This story is truly a very bumpy ride, or should I say, one particular bad bump. And today's story is brought to you by a new streaming service, Magellan TV. I mean that in two ways. Yes, they are sponsoring today's content, and I wouldn't have even known about the case we're covering today if it wasn't for their amazing service. Magellan TV is founded by filmmakers who produce and curate documentaries, series, and specialized playlists of all kinds. From history to science to nature, and yes, of course, true crime, you can find them all and more on Magellan TV. They're digging deep to bring you new content on a weekly basis, and like they did for me with this excellent documentary called Parachute Murder Plot, they want to tell you stories and share insightful content that you haven't seen a million times before. I also love the series Urban Legends. Every episode will keep you guessing. I also recently learned about memory championships in Total Recall, how to remember everything. If you're looking for 4K content, they have a wide selection and there's no additional charge for it. Magellan TV can be watched anytime, anywhere, on your television, laptop, or mobile device. It's compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Google Play, and iOS. After you hear today's case cracked, head over to Magellan TV to see this mystery come to life with amazing footage, interviews, and additional information in Parachute Murder Plot. Go to MagellanTV.com/LordenArts, and you'll even get a 1-month free membership trial. The link is in the description box below. Emil and Victoria met in 2010 when they were both stationed at an army base in Woking, Surrey, England. Both had just ended long relationships in their previous marriages and quickly bonded over their love of skydiving. Within a year of meeting, Victoria was pregnant with their first child, a daughter. In 2011, the two traveled to Emil's home country of South Africa to be married in a small ceremony close to Emil's parents' house. For the next 3 years, he was a doting father to their daughter, and in 2013, Victoria became pregnant with their son. With a new child on the way and the couple buying a new house, everything should have been going well. But Victoria had started to notice something odd happening with her husband. She claimed that he was very argumentative and stayed glued to his phone, even taking it to the bathroom with him. Other things would upset her as well. For instance, Emil would volunteer for training camps abroad, even though Victoria was very pregnant and needed his help at home. He also started to stay overnight at his barracks where he was stationed with the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. Emil complained that the 45-minute commute from his home in Amesbury, Wiltshire was just too much. As her husband grew more distant, Victoria started to feel like a failure as a wife. Soon another blow would rock their marriage. Emil had amassed quite a bit of debt, but he always seemed to have an excuse for it. Luckily, Victoria, who was a highly experienced parachutist and instructor, was able to get her husband extra work packing parachutes in order to help pay the money back. On March 30th, 2015, Victoria was woken by her newborn and went downstairs to heat some milk for his bottle. She immediately picked up the smell of gas. Quickly, she traced the smell back to a valve in the kitchen cupboard, which sat right next to the oven. In a panic, she texted her husband and asked if he had touched the kitchen valve. There was blood on the gas line, and it looked as though it had been tampered with. His reply? He suggested that she should see if the stove was still working. Trying to head off a fight, she texted back and tried to lighten the mood. "Are you trying to bump me off?" she joked. Emil didn't find this funny. He denied everything and said that he would check the stove when he got home. Just over a week later, it appeared Emil wanted to work with Victoria on their marriage. He thought that participating in a parachute jump would remind the couple of the love they shared and that hobby that brought them together. Delighted that he wanted to spend time with her, Victoria agreed. As the two waited with their little girl, Emil tried to take care of not only Victoria's needs, but their child as well. After he collected Victoria's parachute kit, she was told that their little girl needed to use the restroom. He then took both their child and the parachute into the bathroom. This struck Victoria as odd. Normally, you would just set your parachute rig down somewhere until you returned, not take it with you. Unfortunately, the weather that day was poor, and the flight company opted to postpone the jump until the following morning, Easter Sunday. But as the family left the field, instead of handing her kit back to the store as you normally would, Emil insisted that it be stowed in her locker for the night instead. His request made her feel uneasy, but rather than start yet another fight over something she felt was minor, she relented. The next morning, April 5th, 2015, Victoria returned to the airfield somewhat disappointed. Today's weather wasn't much better than the day before, and she feared that she would waste the day in bad weather waiting for a jump that just wasn't going to happen. But Emil encouraged her to stay until conditions improved, and luckily, later that day they did. As she waited for her turn to jump, she talked and fist bumped with the other divers and crew excitedly. After all, she was in her element, doing something that made her happier than anything else in the world. With the confidence that over 2,600 jumps bring with it, Victoria leapt from the plane. After spending only seconds in the air, she pulled the ripcord on her chute and immediately knew something was wrong. Her main chute had become hopelessly wrapped around itself and would not deploy. Confidently, she cut away the main chute and deployed the reserve, only to find that it too was hopelessly tangled. As she tried desperately to get some kind of control, struggling to get her chute corrected, suddenly everything went black. Victoria had plummeted to the ground from 4,000 feet. Miraculously, as the crews made their way to her, they found she had survived with broken ribs, a broken collarbone, and leg and spinal injuries. Rescue crews claim her miraculous survival was only possible because of her small body size and the fact that she had landed on a soft, recently plowed field. As Victoria sat in the hospital, the British Parachute Association tried to figure out why her parachute had not deployed. It's unusual for a main parachute to fail, and almost unheard of for the reserve to do so as well. After a detailed investigation, the association concluded that the chutes had been deliberately sabotaged. They'd notified the police of their findings. First, investigators seized Emil's phone and computer records. They were able to uncover texts not only from a girlfriend, but messages and emails to prostitutes, his ex-wife, who only lived 5 minutes from their home, and various sex clubs. Details of his finances also emerged and showed his reliance on payday loan after payday loan. Investigators spoke with people that were stationed with him on base. They would state that everyone believed Emil was separated from his wife, and they were surprised to hear that the couple had gone skydiving together at all. One coworker would state that the day of Victoria's accident, Emil came to work to print off his wife's life insurance forms. Victoria corroborated this by saying that right after her fall, while she was in intensive care, her husband came to her bedside. Rather than offering comfort or support, he produced critical injury insurance forms to be signed by a doctor. He didn't even say he loved me, Victoria stated. He was there counting up my fractures. You get 1,000 pounds for each break, and he was there totting them up. In 3 consecutive interviews with police, Emil admitted to having affairs and to constantly using his wife's money to cover his many debts, but he always claimed that he had never tried to harm his wife. After his 3rd interview, Emil was arrested for attempted murder and told he had to stay on base and away from his wife and children. As part of Victoria's accident insurance, he received a small amount of money to spend on essentials while he was living in his barracks. His wife now had to care for a toddler and a newborn, even though she was in a body cast with all of her injuries. Victoria insisted that she needed his help, but police insisted he was the last person she needed around her. Emil would offer none of the money to his family. Instead, he spent it on computer games, a PlayStation, and an iPhone. Investigators also questioned Victoria. She corroborated many of the facts that investigators had already uncovered. She knew of at least one affair and of her husband's financial problems. She stated that she was a strong person, but was learning to live with her husband's many flaws. When asked about the day of her jump, she told investigators about her husband's odd behavior and stated that he was in the restroom with their daughter and her parachute for at least 5 minutes. With all their evidence in hand, the prosecution felt sure they could prove that Emil sabotaged his wife's main and reserve chutes. They also had expert information. In a video, Paul Applegate, chairman of the British Parachute Association Rigging Committee, showed how easy it was to remove links from a reserve chute and tangle the lines of the main canopy. And you could do all of it in about 5 minutes. However, when confronted with her own words in court, Victoria quickly backtracked, telling the court that Emil had been quicker than she had first alleged and that she had embellished the details. Quote, "I'm not saying I'm lying completely. I was angry when I made that statement and lied throughout it in order to paint Emil in a bad picture," she told the prosecution. She even went so far as to claim that she had caused the damage to the gas fitting in their home by trying to repair it herself. Because of her startling revelation, Emil's 6-week trial quickly collapsed as the jury was unable to reach a verdict. Even though his wife was now considered a hostile witness and could potentially undermine the future charges, the prosecution still believed they had a case. Starting a new trial, they used their hostile witness to good effect. Even though she tried to backpedal and downplay the details, she constantly reverted to the same thing. Emil always spent about 5 minutes in the bathroom alone with her parachute. The information from the British Parachute Association would ultimately seal his fate. No parachute equipment anywhere in the world had ever failed in this particular way, and that tampering could have been done in about 5 minutes. Emil's second trial would have a very different outcome. In May of 2018, he would be convicted of 2 counts of attempted murder, one for the gas leak and the other for the parachute, along with another count of causing reckless damage to the endangerment of life by damaging that gas fitting, which jeopardized the lives of not only his wife, but his 2 children. He was sentenced to life and will be serving a minimum of 18 years before the possibility of parole. Senior Investigating Officer DI Paul Franklin stated at the end of the proceedings, "From the outset, Emil showed no remorse for what he had done. He lied all the way through 2 trials, but in the end, justice won with the guilty verdicts and now a long prison sentence. He is dangerous. He's a cold, callous, selfish man who cares only about money and his sexual conquests." I also hope this result means that there can now be some closure for his wife Victoria and her family who were victims in this. Case cracked. I'd like to give a big thank you to The Guardian, The New York Post, BBC.com, Honey9.com, NewIdea.com, The Daily Mail, Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's story, and of course, once again, Magellan TV for sponsoring today's episode and helping us all discover a truly mind-blowing story. Remember, you can see this story come to life at Magellan TV in Parachute Murder Plot. You guys know how hard I work to bring you stories you haven't heard before. They're doing the same thing. Head over to MagellanTV.com/Lordenards and try a month for free. That link is in the description box below. Before we end today's video, we also have a little bit of an update on this case. As her husband sat in prison, Victoria decided that it was time to take to the skies once again. Quote, "There have been many nights when I couldn't sleep, or when I would wake with my heart racing, jumping out of my chest, and flashbacks playing on a loop in my head. If I didn't jump, I couldn't fall. It was that straightforward." She wrote a date to jump by in her diary and decided to do it for charity. All money raised would be given to the Wilshire Air Ambulance, whom she credited for saving her life. She made that jump 1 year after Emil was sentenced. I don't know about you guys, but the twists in this story are just mind-boggling to me. Of course, trying to use a parachute in that way right off the bat is just, I can't believe someone would do that to someone else. I mean, the fear and terror that you would be going through when that chute didn't deploy properly, which she actually went through and she now survives with. It's just terrible. And then to know that you're doing that to the mother of your children, not to mention the whole thing about the gas leak, which could have killed your children. This really does not sound like a good guy, and I hope that that parole meeting doesn't go too great. Before I end today's video, I want to thank PayPal supporters Randy Volkel, Emma Rostron, Jennifer Wilson, and Michael Park. Also, a very big thank you to Lucas Crease, who sent a big donation through PayPal. I really appreciate that, Lucas. And I also want to say hello to any other brain scratchers out in the Czech Republic. If any of you know Lucas, buy him a drink or a coffee for me, would you? Take care, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you back here on Wednesday with a brand new episode of Searchlight on the Lord and Arts channel.